That night, when the bedroom door slammed so hard that the picture frame fell from the wall and shattered into pieces, I realized I had reached my breaking point. My thoughts were still echoing in my ears like the gas piercing through my heart. Your house reeks of failure, Mom. It reeks of people who never achieved anything in life, and I'm sick of it. I'm going to live with my mother-in-law. At least she's rich. I stood there paralyzed in the hallway while I listened to the sound of the car driving away. My legs were trembling, but my heart was even more broken than the glass scattered on the floor. My name is Rebecca, and I am 63 years old. This is the story of how my only daughter despised me in the best possible way, but ended up discovering that underestimating a mother can be the biggest mistake anyone can make in their entire life. I was always one of those women who face the world with their own hands. Since my husband Richard left us when Jimena was only 8 years old, I took on all the bills, all the responsibilities, and all the dreams we had built together by myself. It was not easy at all. I worked as a house cleaner for years, leaving home while it was still dark outside and returning when the stars were already shining in the sky. My hands, which used to be soft as Jimena always commented when she was a little girl, gradually became rough and marked by heavy work and chemical cleaning products. Our house was small. It had 2 bedrooms, a cramped kitchen, and a bedroom that always needed some kind of repair. The cheap ceramic floor had some cracks that I covered with caliphal rags that I made myself during the rare hours when I had free time. The walls had needed a fresh coat of paint for years. But there was always a mortgage and bill to pay, some school supplies that Jimena needed, or new sneakers because her old ones were already falling apart even so. I was proud of our little corner of the wall. It was clean and tidy and had been canked with the sweat of my brow. Every piece of furniture in that house and every single object told a story of sacrifice and perseverance. The old refrigerator that I had bought in 12 monthly payments. The second-hand sofa that I had refurbished myself by changing the fabric and fixing the foam with my own 2 hands. The kitchen table that I had sanded and painted, transforming a discarded piece of furniture into something beautiful again. Jimena grew up in that reality. At first she seemed to understand our limitations. When her friends had expensive toys and she did not, I would explain to her patiently that our money needed to be used for more important things. One day, my dear daughter, we will have more, I would tell her, and she would accept it with the innocent smile of a child who has not yet experienced the cruelty of the world. Things began to change when she entered adolescence. The desire to have what others had became stronger and stronger. The comments started subtly at first. Mom, Alejandra's house has 3 floors, or Veronica's mom bought her no cell phone. I would swallow hard and try to explain our situation. But each time I could see that expression of disappointment growing stronger on her face. It was in college that everything got completely worse. Jimena managed to get a partial scholarship to study business administration, and I worked myself to exhaustion to pay the rest of that tuition. I did extra cleaning jobs on weekends and accepted any work that came my way. There were days when I ate nothing but bread with Marianne so that she could have money for transportation and lunch at the university. I remember one day when she came home with her eyes sparkling with excitement. She had been invited to a party at the house of a wealthy classmate. I spent money I did not have to buy her a beautiful dress, one of those she had seen in the display windows of the shopping malls. When she left that night looking as beautiful as she always was, I felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. Something told me that this new world opening up to her might end up separating us. It was at that party that she met Morris, the son of a successful businesswoman in the real estate sector. I was studying at the same university, but in the economics program. When Jimena brought him to see our house for the first time, I immediately noticed the judgmental look he gave our modest living room. Sat on the edge of the sofa as if he were afraid of being contaminated by our simplicity. And when I offered him coffee, he politely declined, but with an expression that said more than words could ever express even so. I welcomed the young man with all the menace my mother had taught me. After all, if my daughter liked him, I would make the effort to like him too. Deep down I hoped that he would see beyond appearances and value the incredible young woman he had raised over the following months. Jimena's behavior changed gradually. She started spending more time at Mora's house, coming home only to sleep and sometimes not even that. When she was home, she complained about everything. The noise of the old washing machine. The smell of the cleaning product used. The fan that made noise because one of the blades was bent. I tried to talk to her and tried to make her see the value of simple things. But it was as if we were speaking different languages. Says sweet girl who once sang with me, while he washed the dishes, he transformed into a stranger who barely looked me in the eyes. That was when he met Mrs. Isabel Mora's Asmade. She showed up at our house one Sunday afternoon, driving an imported car that completely clashed with our simple street. She got out of the car like someone stepping onto dangerous territory, looking around with distrust. She was wearing jewelry that it was Satan was worth more than everything he owned. Jimena welcomed her with an enthusiasm she had not shown me in a very long time. The two of them chatted like old friends, talking about brands and trips and expensive restaurants that he only knew by hearsay. He stayed there in the kitchen, preparing coffee and listening to every word, feeling small and smaller, more and more insignificant. When he finally joined them in the living room, Mrs. Isabel barely disguised her discomfort. She looked at my hands marked bivouac and then at Jimena's perfectly manicured nails. Something in her gaze said she was evaluating how much he was worth. Apparently not very much, Rebecca, right? Jimena has told me so much about you. It must be difficult to raise a daughter alone and especially in these conditions. She made a vague gesture that encompassed our entire living room. It was not a question. It was a statement disguised as sympathy. I swallowed my wounded pride and responded politely. Yes, it has its challenges, but Jimena has always been a source of great pride for me. She smiled. That kind of smile that does not reach the S. Of course. She is a special girl. She deserves the best in life, does she not? At that moment, I saw Jimena looking at Mrs. Isabel with admiration, the kind of look she used to detect me. And I understood with painful clarity that I was losing my daughter not only to Maurice, but to an entire world that I could never offer her. Mrs. Isabel's visits became more frequent. She always brought expensive gifts for Jimena. Designer clothes and imported perfumes and designer handbags. With each gift, I watched my daughter moving further away from me and from the life we had built together. It was during one of those visits that Mrs. Isabel dropped the news. Jimena, my dear, I have already talked to Maurice and we have decided. Why don't you come live with us? We have a guest room that nobody uses. It is large and has its own bedroom. You would be closer to the university and you would save on transportation. My heart sank in my chest as I waited for Jimena's response. She hesitated for a moment, glanced at me quickly, and then smiled at Mrs. Isabel. It would be wonderful, but first I need to talk to my mom. Mrs. Isabel shrugged as if my opinion were mere formality. Of course, dear, think it over. Self-stands, that night after Mrs. Isabel left, I tried to talk to Jimena. I sat next to her on her bed and asked if she was really considering the proposal. Mom, do you understand? Their house is 10 minutes from the university. I would save 2 hours at bus time a day. Timmy could use to study more. But this is your home, Jimena, your real home. She looked down at the faded walls and the old wardrobe and sighed. Yes, I know, but maybe it is time to experience other environments. So what she chose felt like a sleep. Environments. As if our house, our home, were just an environment and an inadequate one at that. That night I cried quietly in my room, trying not to make any noise so she would not hear me. I knew I was being selfish wanting to keep her with me, but I also knew that Mrs. Isabel was not offering a room out of kindness. There was something predatory about that woman, a desire to tear Jimena away from her roots, to make her forget where she came from. In the weeks that followed, Jimena became increasingly distant. She went days without coming home, and when she did come, we barely talked. I watched helplessly as she gradually packed up some belongings, taking her things little by little to Mrs. Isabel's house, as if she were testing the waters to see what it would be like to live there. I tried everything to win my daughter back. I made her favorite dishes. I bought her a small gift with the money he had saved to fix the shower at. I tried to start conversations about the old times, but it was as if there was an invisible wall between us, made of shame and resentment. One day I came home early from work. I was exhausted with a backache after cleaning 3 different houses. All I wanted was a hot bed and a few hours of rest before Jimena got home from university. But when I opened the door, I heard voices coming from her room. I approached silently and stopped near the partial open door. Jimena was on the phone, probably with Maurice, and did not know I was so Maggie. Now I know, she said, laughing. It is horrible here. You cannot imagine how hard it is to sleep on the tall mattress. And the bedroom, oh my god, it has mold in the corners that will not come off no matter what. I think I am going to have to burn all my clothes when I move out completely because they are starting to pick up the smell of this place. I stood paralyzed, unable to move or breathe. Every wet was as the wound. The smell of this place was the smell of the cheap laundry detergent I used to wash our clothes. The smell of the cleaning product I applied religiously every day to keep our house clean, even with all our difficulties. I am so embarrassed, you know. The other day, Daniela asked me where I lived, and I gave her a fake address. I did not want anyone at the university to know I lived here. I felt hot tears running down my face, but I did not make a sound. I slowly backed away from the door and left the house. I walked aimlessly through the neighborhood streets, trying to process the pain I was feeling. My own daughter was ashamed of me, of the house I had managed to provide with so much sacrifice, of the life I had built for that to abuse when I returned hours later. I pretended I had not had anything. I greeted Jimena normally. I asked about her day. I said as if everything was fine. But inside something had changed. A seed of resentment had been planted, and I did not know how to stop it from growing. In the following weeks, Jimena was increasingly absent. She slept at home only once or twice a week, always with that expression of someone making a great sacrifice. I watched powerlessly as she drifted further and further away, and then the night came. I was in the living room, watching a cooking show on our old television when I heard a noise. First the front door slamming shut, then heavy footsteps down the hallway. And then the sound of doors opening and closing violently in Jimena's room. I got up with my heart racing and went over there. I stepped in the doorway and saw my daughter throwing clothes into two large suitcases open on the bed. Her movements were frantic and angry, as if each piece of clothing represented a piece of the past she wanted to tear away from herself. Jimena, what is happening? I asked, my voice betraying my nervousness. She turned to me, and the look she gave me made me take a step back. It was a look of pure contempt, as if it was something unpleasant she had found under her shoe. I'm leaving, ma'am. Once and for all. But why? Did something happen? She let out a dry, humorless laugh. Life happened, ma'am. I woke up. I looked at this place, this house, and I realized I cannot take it anymore. Your house reeks of failure, ma'am. It reeks of people who never achieved anything in life. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I tried to breathe, but it was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. Jimena, this house is our home. It is everything I managed to give you through so much hard work. She rolled her eyes impatiently. And that is what you do not understand, ma'am. I deserve more than this. I deserve more than this house falling apart. This humble neighborhood, this mediocre life you chose for both of us, that I chose? I repeated incredulously. You think I chose to be widowed Teddy Phoebe? That I chose to raise you alone without help from anyone? That I chose to clean other people's houses so I could give you food and education? Other people went through difficulties and succeeded in life, she replied, continuing to throw clothes into the suitcase. Look at Mora's mom. She also started from the bottom, and today she has a company, a wonderful house, an imported car. You settled, ma'am. You settled for this life of a loser. Every word was a stab in my chest. My own daughter calling me a loser, a failure. A girl for whom I had sacrificed everything. For whom I had given every drop of my sweat and every piece of my heart. I am going to live with Mrs. Isabel and Morris. She continued, closing one of the suitcases forcefully. There it is, a real house, with winning people. There I can have my friends over without dying of embarrassment. There I can finally be who I was born to be. And who were you born to be, Jimena? I asked, my voice low, almost a whisper. She stopped for a moment, looked me up and down, and responded coldly. Someone better than you, without a doubt. It was at that moment that something inside me broke. It was not just a broken heart of a rejected mother. It was as if Adam had best, releasing years of repressed resentment, of unrecognized sacrifices, of unrequited love. Get out, I said simply. She seemed surprised in my reaction. Perhaps she expected tears, please, desperate attempts to make her stay. What? You had me. Get out of my house. If it is so terrible, if it reeks so much of failure, then leave now, she finished, closing the second suitcase. Looking at me with a mixture of surprise and contempt. That is exactly what I am going to do, and you can be sure I am not coming back. I watched in silence as she dragged the suitcases down the hallway. At the living room door, she turned down as if expecting me to change my mind at the last moment, to beg her to stay. But I did nothing of the sort. I stood there in the middle of the hallway, feeling the tears fall silently down my face. When the door slammed shut, the picture frame with our photo fell from the wall and shattered on the floor. It was an old photo from when she was about 10 years old. We were at the beach, hugging each other and smiling at the camera. It was our only trip together, the fruit of an entire year of saving every penny. I crouched down and picked up the photo from among the pieces of glass. I looked at those smiling faces and wondered at what moment everything had started to go wrong. At what moment my sweet little girl had transformed into that beaten, contemptuous stranger. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen staring at nothing, mentally replaying every moment of our life together, trying to understand where it had gone wrong. Had I been too permissive, or perhaps too strict? Should I have worked even harder, made even greater sacrifices to give her the luxurious life she so desired? But at some point, during the early years, between one cup of tea and another, something changed inside me. A small but firm voice began to make itself heard. A voice that said I had done nothing wrong, that I had always given my best, that the problem was not me, nor our house, nor our simple life. The problem was that Jimena had been seduced by empty values, by appearances, by a distorted idea of what really matters in life. And it was there, in that small kitchen she so despised. The team made a decision. I would not sit down, feeling sorry for myself. I would not drown in tears of self-pity. It was time to think about myself for the first time in many years. It was time to show my daughter and mainly myself that a simple house is not a house of failures. That hands que last by week are not the hands of losses. That a modest life lived with dignity and honesty is a life worth living. When the sun came up, I already had a plan. A plan that would change everything, not only for me but also for Jimena. What she did not know was that, by slamming the door, she had awakened in me a strength I myself did not know I had. And that strength was going to surprise everyone, including myself. That morning I got up early the new shell. Despite a sleepless night, I did not feel tired. It was as if a new energy was running through my veins, fueled not by anger or resentment, but by a cold and calculated determination I had never experienced before. The first thing I did was call all the houses where I worked as a cleaner. One by one I explained that I needed a break, that I was going through personal problems. Most understood, although some employees made it clear they could not guarantee my position when I returned. I did not care. For the first time in years, I was not thinking about security, about stability, about survival. I was thinking about transformation. Next I gathered all the savings I had put away over the years. It was not much, just a few thousand pesos I had saved penny by penny for emergencies. I always thought that money would be for a serious illness, for a major problem with the money in my hands, I left the house with a clear purpose. My first stop was at a hardware store. I bought paint, file, sandpaper, brushes, rollers, everything I needed to transform the faded walls of my house. I chose light and bright colors. A soft yellow for the living room, an aqua green for the kitchen, a same blue for the bedrooms. Colors that brought life, that drove away the feeling of defeat that Jimena had pointed out. On my way back home, I stopped by a used furniture store in Newell. Soon Mr. Francisco was a friendly gentleman who always greeted me when I passed by on my way to work. He recognized me immediately. Mrs. Rebecca, what a pleasant surprise. Did you come looking for something specific? I looked around the store at the furniture of different styles and eras and smiled. Actually, I came to see if you might be interested in buying some of my furniture. I seemed surprised. Are you moving? No, Mr. Francisco. I renewing myself, I explained what I wanted to do. Sell some old furniture, the living room table, some chairs, the worn sofa, to buy different pieces that would give a new feel to my house. I agreed to come by the next day to evaluate what I had to sell. Back at my house, I started working immediately. I took down all the pictures from the walls, moved the furniture from the center of the living room, covered the floor with old newspapers. It was not the first time I had painted a house. I had done it a few times to supplement my income, but it was the first time I was doing it for myself. For the simple pleasure of renewing the space that was mine. I worked all day, stopping only to eat a quick sandwich for lunch. When night fell, the living room already had its first coat of paint. The smell of fresh paint filled the house. A smell that for me did not represent poverty or failure, as Jimena had said, but renewal. A new beginning. I slept exhausted that night, but with a sense of purpose I had not felt in years. For the first time since Jimena left, I did not cry before falling asleep. I did not spend hours replaying her cruel words in my head. I simply closed my eyes and slept, wrapped in physical tiredness and the certainty that I was on the right path. The following days followed a similar pattern. I would get up early, work on the house renovation until late, and collapse into bed exhausted but satisfied. Mr. Francisco came as promised and took some of my old furniture. Leaving in exchange an amount that added to my savings would allow me to buy some new pieces. A week after Jimena had left, the transformation of the house was already visible. The walls had new and vibrant colors. The few remaining pieces of furniture had been sanded and painted. The floor had received the deep cleaning and a new shine. The old curtains had been replaced with one Sibat sale, made of a light fabric that let light enter freely. But I knew that the transformation needed to go deeper. It was not enough to change the appearance of the house. I needed to change myself, the way I saw myself, the way I faced life. It was thinking about this that I made another important decision. Instead of going back to work as a house cleaner, I decided to use the rest of my savings to take a quick sewing course. I had always been skilled with my hands, and on the few occasions when I had time to sew something, a patchwork quilt, simple clothes for Jimena, I felt genuine satisfaction. The course lasted only a month, 4 hours a day. To cover basic expenses during that period, I sold some small pieces of jewelry I had saved. A small gold chain I received from my parents when I turned 15. A pair of earrings that Richard gave me when we started dating. It was not easy to part with those memories, But he understood that sometimes you need to let go of the past to embrace the future. The course was a revelation. It discovered he had a natural talent for sewing, especially for creating decorative pieces for Seome. Cushions and quilts and kittens. Se teacher Mrs. Carmen, a woman in her 70s with nimble hands and perceptives, noticed my ability quickly. Rebecca, you have a gift. She told me one day watching a cushion I had just finished with a geometric pattern I created myself. Have you ever thought about doing this professionally? The idea had never occurred to me. Sewing had always been just a hobby, something needed without necessity or in rare moments of leche. Do you think I could? I asked unsurely. Mrs. Carmen smiled. I am certain. Your pieces have personality, they have life. And there is a growing market for quality craftsmanship. You know, people who are tired of buying soulless industrialized things. That conversation planted us in my mind. In the days that followed, while I continued transforming my house, I began to research the subject. I visited craft fairs, talked to other artisans, joined social media groups dedicated to the topic. I discovered that Mrs. Carmen was right. There was a market for the type of work I could do. At the same time, I had no news from Jimena. Part of me hoped she would call, that she would ask to come back, that she would regret the harsh words she had said. Another part knew that would not happen anytime soon. Her pride and mine, which had awakened after years of dormancy, created an invisible barrier between us instead of consuming myself thinking about it. I channeled all my energy into my transformation project. When the sewing course ended, I already had a clear plan in mind. I would use Jimena's room as my workshop. I would transform that space that now represented abandonment and rejection into a place of creation, of renewal, of life, with the help of Mr. Francisco, WHO sold me a set work table at a friendly price. And Mrs. Carmen, who gave me scraps of various fabrics to get me started, I set up my small workspace. I bought a just but well-maintained sewing machine and began creating my first pieces intended for sale. At first it was difficult. I worked many hours perfecting every detail, every stitch, every choice of color and texture. Sometimes I was so absorbed in the work that I forgot to eat to rest. But it was a different kind of tiredness from what I felt when I worked as a house cleaner. It was a tiredness that came accompanied by satisfaction, by fulfillment. My first sale happened almost by chance. A neighbor, Mrs. Luisa, came to visit to see the changes I had made to the house. The news of the transformation had already spread through the neighborhood. She was delighted with the cushion that was on the sofa. How beautiful, Rebecca. What a lovely thing. Where did you buy it? I made it, I replied, feeling a mixture of pride and shyness. Really? She picked up the cushion, analyzing the details. The perfect finish, the unique pattern. Rebecca, this could be sold in a boutique. Have you ever thought about selling this? That was how I received my first order. 3 cushions for Mrs. Luisa's renovated living room. She paid in advance, which allowed me to buy more materials to expand my possibilities. When I delivered the order, she was so satisfied that she showed it to other friends who were also interested. In a few weeks, I already had a small portfolio of clients. It was Mrs. Carmen who encouraged me to take the next step, creating a social media page to showcase my work. Nowadays that is how people find quality handmade products. She explained, since he was not very familiar with technology. He asked for help from Mrs. Luisa's daughter, a young woman in her 20s who understood the subject. The page called Homework by Rebecca was born one Sunday afternoon, 3 months after Jimena had slammed the door. The first photos were simple, taken with my old cell phone. But they showed the essence of my work. Unique pieces made with care and love that transformed ordinary spaces into special places. To my surprise, the page started gaining followers quickly. At first it was just acquaintances, friends of friends, but soon the reach expanded. I started receiving messages from people in other neighborhoods asking if I shipped to other parts of the city, wanting to know prices, delivery times, customization possibilities. 6 months after Jimena's departure, my life had changed completely. My house, once a target of contempt and shame for my daughter, was now my business card, my showroom. Clients came to me to see my work in person, to see how my creations looked in a real environment. And instead of shame, I felt immense pride when I opened the door and invited those people to come in. The room that had been Jimena's was now a complete workshop with shelves full of colorful fabrics, a large and better cutting table, a new sewing machine but with the profits from sales. The walls were decorated with fabric pictures I had made myself, each one representing a different phase of my journey of self-discovery. Financially, I was in a much better situation than when I worked as a house cleaner. I was nowhere near rich, but for the first time in my life, I did not need to count every penny to make it to the end of the month. I could afford small luxuries, a dinner out every now and then, a haircut at a nice salon, and a pair of shoes, not because the old ones were falling apart, but simply because he wanted them more important than that, however, was how he felt inside. Since a key and submissive woman, WHO endured slights and humiliations in silence. WHO lived only to serve others, had been left behind. In her place emerged that Rebecca WHO respected herself. WHO was proud of her own work. WHO knew her worth. It was at that moment in my life, when I had finally found my pet, that Jimenari appeared. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was finishing a quilt ordered by a client from a wealthy neighborhood when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there she was, my daughter, but so different from the arrogant young woman who had slammed the door months before. Jimena was in a wet visible dark.